Welcome back to the Tank Me Later podcast, which is part of Fantasy Basketball International. I am Noah Rubin, and this is episode 1 of our prospect profile draft series. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite prospects in this draft, Alex Sarr. So let's go ahead and get into this thing. And before we get into actually talking about this draft series and what it is, I just wanted to remind you that support for this Fantasy Basketball International podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below the waist grooming. Shaving your jewels doesn't have to be risky business anymore thanks to the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. This trimmer is all about keeping things smooth and safe so you can trim with confidence. Treat your wrinkleberries and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com to get 20% off plus free shipping with code FBI. With Manscaped, it's easy grooming, no surprises. We know every dude gets the heebie-jeebies when it's time for a close shave down under, especially when using the wrong tools. That's precisely why Manscaped is my go-to for those delicate spots. Trust me, this trimmer will be your crown jewel's best buddy. You can get 20% off, again, free shipping with the code FBI at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code FBI at manscaped.com. Show your balls some love and feel free as a dove. And that 20% off also compounds on with the deals they already have going on their site. Definitely give that a look and help. That'll also help support us. So that would be much appreciated. But we're going to go ahead and get into the draft series for this one. First off, what is this draft series going to look like? Because it's a new-ish thing. I didn't really do this last year. A little bit of draft content, but not the way I'm hoping to do it this year. So I've mentioned it on the last couple of episodes of my podcast, but it's just going to be smaller episodes. This one's probably going to be the longest just because I'm going to explain a little bit, but just to familiarize fantasy managers, specifically ones playing in dynasty leagues, but if you're playing in redraft, this will be helpful as well, or any keeper league, same thing. Familiarize yourself with the draft prospects and the fantasy impact that they can have, because of course there's plenty of talk about what these players can bring to NBA teams, not as much fantasy specific there. So hopefully this will at least help everyone get more familiar with the prospects. About 2 months, we're starting about 2 months before the draft starts. That way you can kind of know maybe, okay, who do I want to target in my draft? Have an idea, or who am I hoping that this prospect goes to on draft night? Because I think that that'll help maximize their talent and could make them a better pick in my rookie draft. So that's kind of the idea of this, where they might go in the draft, basic information about them, what the numbers look like, and then just teams that I think they'll fit well in, floors, ceilings, strengths, weaknesses, a realistic take. Not, hopefully I don't get too into the ceiling and it can be pretty realistic about the floor, because I tend to be pretty optimistic about draft prospects at times, just because it's fun to be kind of idealistic about what these guys could be. But we'll go ahead and get into this thing. So Alex Sarr played for the Perth Wildcats. Kind of a big guy, forward / center is what he's being listed as, because he could probably play 4 or 5 in the NBA. 19 years old. He's about to turn 19 at the time of recording this. He's actually about a week out from his birthday, so he'll be 19 when he's drafted. 7-footer, 205 is his weight. So sizable guy. This is what the per 36 stats look like. So 19.2 points, 9 rebounds, 2.1 assists, 0.9 steals, 2.1 blocks, 1.1 threes, 2.1 turnovers, 50% from the floor, 27.6% from 3, and 70.7% from the free throw line. Just looking at this, if you look at just his numbers and what he did or has done this season, they're not going to look great. But it's about projecting the upside here, and obviously playing in a pro league at 18 years old, not going to see the minutes that he'll see as a rookie in the NBA. So, but still, per 36 stats, almost a 2010 double double, multiple blocks, hit a 3 per game, low percentage on the threes, low percentage on the free throws. But this is what the numbers look like. Could be, I mean, I think best case scenario is that it's fairly similar to this as a rookie. I would assume that it's not this good as a rookie, especially I don't think he's going to get 2 blocks per game as a rookie, or 19 points, 9 rebounds. That's pretty freaking good. I think those are more realistic than the blocks. I'm assuming the blocks will be a little lower, but 3 per game. I'm assuming the field goal percentage will be a little lower, but this is what the numbers have looked like so far. Or I guess not so far, just looked like this season. So my rank, he's the number 1 player on my board. No ceilings, love their draft content. Also has him number 1 in their latest mock and their latest big board. He went first, and they have him ranked first. The Athletic, I was only able to find one from before the NCAA tournament, but he was the number 2 player picked in their mock. So it's a little bit outdated, but that was the most recent thing I could find for them. ESPN and The Ringer also had him 2 in their latest mock, or not latest mock, latest kind of big board. So a guy that should be one of the first few picks off the board. Kind of depends on the way the lottery goes at this point, but could easily, like, he should be going within the first. I'd be shocked if he fell outside the top 2. I think we'll get into some more of like the team fit stuff like that, but I'm expecting him to go, if not 1, number 2. So some of the strengths, I think, if we're just looking at categories, points, he's got scoring upside. The 19 points per 36 is good, especially in a pro league at 18 years old. He's got a little bit of a shot, not a high percentage as we saw, but he's willing to shoot them, and he can make them, which I think just says a lot, and is hopefully kind of, I think that's what's going to make or break him as a prospect, which we'll get to in a second. But points, I think, good score. He's got a nice mid-range shot, so he's got options offensively. He's got tools offensively. The rebounds are good. The shot blocking is great. I think he's got a lot of upside as a pick and roll guy. If he lands with the right team that has an elite point guard, or just a very good point guard, could generate plenty of easy looks for him. And I think that'll be the ideal scenario for him. That'll maximize his skill set. The upside is a shooter. Like I said, low percentage, but I think he has that upside to be kind of a, not necessarily what you would call a stretch 5, but a guy that can hit threes, and a guy that can be used in pick and pop situations or pick and roll situations where he's attacking and getting mid-range shots. I think he's got a lot of things to unlock offensively, and just because it wasn't very effective when he was 18 years old in the pro league, doesn't mean that it can't be within a few years in the NBA. I think the defense is, that's where he's making his money. I think he's got a lot of upside offensively. That's why he's my number 1 in this draft, is that he can be really good offensively, but I think that the defense is almost a guarantee. We saw the block numbers, we saw the steal numbers. Like, that's great because he can be effective in fantasy basketball too. But he's a shot blocker. He is a guy that he's shown that he can switch out onto guards and be a really good defender. So I don't know. I think he's a guy that can just be more useful than just like a one-trick pony on the defensive end. Like, he can, like, being able to switch in today's NBA is so, like, that's going to open up so much for defenses. Not trying to make a comparison here saying that these are the same players, because that's not what I'm saying at all. But you see what Miami's able to do because Bam Adebayo is able to switch onto basically anybody in the NBA and play really good defense. Like, that opens up so much for them defensively. Not saying Alex Sarr is going to be able to be that good on the perimeter, but he can be an effective perimeter defender, which I think says a lot about him as a prospect and can open up a lot for teams. Like, he's a nice building block for teams. That's the other thing with this draft, which it's not an uncommon thing to say, but last year we had Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller, Thompson twins. Like, at least I'd say the top 4 players were guys that could be potential franchise guys. While it's not, this class isn't full of guys that are going to be bad or anything like that, but there's less guys that feel like guaranteed superstars. Some of them I truly believe like have that upside, but you're looking more for good players or guys that can start as opposed to your franchise player in this draft for the most part. Sarr's a guy that I think has that upside, but there's not many in this draft, and just him being a very good starter would be great. I mentioned the pick and roll. I think he's a really good lob threat as well, and he's very athletic. So I think that'll kind of, again, open up a lot for him in the NBA. Weaknesses, honestly, I put his current shot because, like I said, it's a low percentage. The mid-range, he's got a nice mid-range move, but just being realistic, like what if he just continues to be a guy that shoots that never truly improves? Like he has the upside. I think he can get there, but what if he doesn't? So, it's not ideal. And then the free throw percentage is also a weakness for him. It's like specifically in fantasy, 70.7% is bad. And if he is able to be as involved offensively as I think he can be, and he's shooting enough free throws, then that percentage is extra harmful because some of the really bad free throw shooters in today's NBA may shoot 2 or 3 a game. And that's like, okay, that's not a big deal. So they shoot 2 for 3, 1 for 3. That doesn't affect your team as much as, a guy like a Giannis that's shooting 10 free throws a game and making 6 or 7. So a lot of how bad the free throw shooting impacts your team will be dependent on how good he is offensively. But the weakness, the current shot being a weakness, is just being realistic and honest. Like, it's not great. He has the upside, but it's not great. I think as far as his ceiling, I think he can be an all-star. I think he can be an all-defensive player. And I think that, that's attainable based off what he has in front of him. Now, I'm a firm believer in where you land impacts a ton. Like, true superstars, I think, can land anywhere and they'll be fine. I think that true busts can land anywhere and it wasn't going to work out. But for most everybody in the NBA, it depends a lot on where you land and how you're developed. That really turns you into what kind of player you are. So what does that look like for Sarr? It depends on who drafts him. I think that his floor is a rotational big with shot blocking upside. Like, I think that the worst case scenario is he is a 7th or 8th man that plays 10 to 15 minutes per game, shows a couple of fun flashes, blocks a couple shots. Like, man, why isn't this guy playing more? And then he goes down the offensive end. You're like, oh, that's why he doesn't play anymore. That's the floor. But like a rotational guy that helps an NBA team. I don't think he's a total bust that doesn't make it in the league more than 5 years, I think, or more than 3 years, whatever. I think he's, that's his floor. Some ideal fits. I think a lot of looking at the top teams, like as far as who has the best odds, like you're looking at Detroit has the best odds and they have, oh my gosh, Jalen Duren. There we go. Washington doesn't really have a center, but then you have Portland with Ayton, Charlotte with Mark Williams, Spurs obviously have Wemby. So a few teams that kind of have an established center. So, and like I said, this is just kind of my thoughts on the way this draft is going to go, is that since you're not necessarily drafting for a true superstar, like a franchise player, it may not be as many teams saying we're just going to go best player available. They might be trying to fill a positional need. It depends on how teams view these players. Like if someone views Sarr as the best player in the draft and a true superstar, then sure. Like if Detroit sees him that way, they might just take him just because he's the best player in the draft and say, we'll figure things out with Jalen Duren and James Wiseman. I would hate if Detroit added just another center and just said, we'll figure it out. But I wouldn't hate him alongside Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, but having Duren there makes things a little messy for what that looks like for fantasy purposes. So I think Washington is a good fit simply because I think would be the day one starting center. Like, unless they truly think that Marvin Bagley is the guy, I think that Sarr would come in and be the day one center. And even if they do think Bagley's the guy, I still think that Sarr would come in and be the day one center just because of how good he is. And you know what? Now I'm looking at Tankathon, and I think that I got the number wrong. And he didn't average 2.1 blocks per 36. It was 3.1 blocks per 36. That was my bad. So that's even better for his shot blocking upside. So apologies for typing that in incorrectly. Even better as a shot blocker. And then some of the other ones, this is teams leaping up in the lottery to get him, but Memphis has the 7th best odds. I think that having him in there with Jaren Jackson Jr. in the front court with John Moran at point guard, like, that would be elite for them. But obviously, if Memphis leaps up to number 1, that would be crazy. Same thing with Atlanta, which that may actually change. I think that they have a Kongu, obviously, but I think having like a Trae Young Sarr pick and roll would be very fun to watch. Now, I'm recording this the day after the Hawks lost in the play-in tournament, and now Trae Young played horrible. And, he is dealing with a finger injury, but rumors are going to be swirling, saying that he's going to get traded or DeJounte's going to get traded or whatever. We'll see what happens, but I think a Trae Young, Alex Sarr pick and roll would be a ton of fun. Those are probably my top 3 teams. I think Toronto would also be a pretty solid one that has a more realistic chance of kind of leaping up a little bit. I wouldn't hate Charlotte with LaMelo there, but obviously I still believe in Mark Williams. Just a frustrating lost season. But yeah, I think that it kind of depends on, and that's just based off players. I mentioned that, the teams still have to develop these guys. So that's just, I'm looking at how they fit on these teams. And like playing with the players that are already there, not necessarily, I really believe that this team will develop him the best. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying based on who's already there, these teams will fit the best with Sarr. So that's what we're looking at. So noticing that this is about a 15-minute episode, about an 18-minute episode. We're going to try and get this down a little shorter, make this a little bit more digestible, but hopefully you feel a little bit more comfortable with Alex Sarr, who he is, and whether or not you want to draft him in your rookie draft. But that's going to do it for this first episode of the TML draft series.
You just listened to another episode from the Fantasy Basketball International Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. And for more information about joining our community, please check out our website at fbibasketball.com.